or the crime rate in their gated neighborhoods or the social cohesion of their communities because they're insulated from all of that. Instead, they repeat diversity is our strength 3 times like a spell and assume the best will happen. The rest of us, as the former president noted, can shut up and say thank you. So how exactly is this faith-based immigration policy working out so far? Well, let's see. We watched dreamers blockade Disneyland. We watched them harass lawmakers outside their homes to demand an amnesty that they have no legal right to. That's ominous enough. But there are other signs. Here's one. Linda Sarsour. She's a professional activist. She's the child of Palestinian immigrants. You would think that she'd be grateful for the opportunities this country has given her family, especially considering where they came from. But no. Linda Sarsour is not grateful. She hates our country and the people who founded it. During a demonstration yesterday in Washington, Sarsour denounced America and then went on to attack Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer for the color of his skin. Watch this.
I'm talking to Chuck Schumer, who's also from Brooklyn. I'm tired of white men negotiating on the backs of people of color and communities like ours. But I also remember that I live in a country that was founded on the extermination of indigenous people. You have a fascist in the highest office of this land who is running ICE, which has always been a rogue agency. But now they're acting like the Gestapo, going and picking up people in the middle of the night.
Notice the cheers from the crowd. A lot of people agree with Linda Sarsour, and that should make you nervous. We've invited millions and millions of people into this country in recent years. There are now more immigrants in America right now than at any time in the history of the country. Is America more united than ever before? Is it stronger? Please. It's just the opposite, and everyone knows it. Maybe that's because our elites welcome immigrants by telling them how horrible America is and how bigoted its native population. Our immigrants believe that. Why wouldn't they? It's not their fault, it's ours. We're creating a lot of Linda Sarsours. This is a recipe for civil war. Diverse countries need a reason to stick together. They don't do it organically. Our elites ought to be staying up late, night after night, every night, trying to figure out what that reason is. Why should we hang together? A shared language, a shared culture, a shared set of core beliefs? Pick one. Our ruling class rejects all of those. Just shut up and say thank you. That's their answer. It won't end well. Ivan Sanchez is a Democratic congressional candidate in Texas for the 7th District there, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Sanchez, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tucker, for allowing us to practice democracy and allowing the other side of the aisle to say a few words.
Oh, amen. We do every night, and I believe in that with total sincerity. I want to hear people I disagree with. That's right, the American dream. Thank you. But maybe we'll agree on this. Tell me your response when you hear a child of immigrants say to a room full of people here illegally, immigrants, this country was founded on the extermination of indigenous peoples. Does that bother you?
Well, I believe we're a country of immigrants, right? Everyone from all over the world came here and are still coming here. But right. We did, in a sense, force ourselves in to create now the greatest country that the world has ever seen.
But I guess, well, we're not. I'm not an immigrant. You're probably not an immigrant either. We're not all immigrants, but there are a lot of immigrants here. I agree, and I think a lot of them. Oh, you are? Okay, great. Well, I think a lot of immigrants are good people, actually. But I think it's really important that they become part of this country. And in order to do that, you have to love the country. Does it bother you when someone that immigrants listen to, like Linda Sarsour, says this is a bad country run by racists, and its history is inherently racist? This country is built on murdering people. Do you believe that?
I think they're just a little bit frustrating about the lack of representation much in Congress or our legislators. My friend, I am basically a dreamer with papers. I was brought to this country at 6 years old through absolutely no fault of my own. My mother was actually a prosecuting attorney and my father a geophysicist in the country of Colombia. And my father was kidnapped, my mom's office was blown up, and so a letter came to my mother's office saying, next time you put your kids in the school bus, they're not coming back. So we landed here. I was sold on the idea that we were coming to see the great Disneyland and Bill Clinton, and we had to start all over. But I don't know why I'm
and I'll stop you there because it's a familiar and a great story, and I'm in favor of that story. But I just want to but the details matter to me, I'm an American citizen, I suppose like you. Do you think, you said they don't have representation, do you think people who aren't citizens deserve representation in Congress?
I think they're humans, and everybody deserves the respect and dignity. Definitely. I have no idea why.
That wasn't my question.
So privileged to be to have that paper.
Do people? Wait, hold on. Do people who are not American citizens deserve to be represented in the Congress of the United States? You suggested they were.
They deserve a voice.
This clear.
They deserve a voice. They deserve a voice. I think even if
why would they deserve a voice in the Congress? Okay,
even if
I'm not asking Reagan. He's not here. Okay, hold on. I'm just asking you. So people who are not American citizens deserve to be heard in the Congress. Does that include people living in Namibia or Norway or Iceland? I mean, does the world deserve a voice in Congress? Because our understanding was, the American understanding was Congress is for American citizens. That's what our democracy is.
Yeah, the people that are definitely contributing to our society and live in our neighborhoods definitely do deserve a voice. And you know, if we go,
so citizenship doesn't matter. You don't need to be a citizen to be represented by the Congress.
No. Of course you do. But there's people that have been living here for longer times than I have, and pay taxes and take their kids to school and contribute to society. And literally,
look, I'm not attacking him. It's just that if you're going to have a country, you got to figure out what it means to be a citizen.
The #1 country in the world. That's what we want to do. This country provided us opportunity. How beautiful is that? We want to make sure that this country will progress. We want to stay the #1 in the world, right? And there's China.
I believe that, and that's why, and Russia, I want that too. Which is, hold on, wait, slow down. I'm not going to let you give your speech because I probably agree with a lot of it. I want to remain #1 too. That's why I want to ask you these two questions. Before we, as Americans, let people become citizens and vote in our elections and get represented in that Congress, should we ask them to agree with what's in the Constitution and speak English?
Yeah, the thing is that the last immigration policy we had is older than the internet or computers. It's very outdated. If you want to legally immigrate from Mexico or from India, the wait is 25 years old.
We're almost out of time, so I'm really going to press you, Ivan. Hold on. I want to press you to answer my question, which is, should we ask that immigrants, before they become citizens, speak English well and agree with the Constitution?
I agree that they need to learn the language like I have, right?
Yes.
And of course, follow the law. But at times, just like my mother, right? She came here to the United States all of a sudden. A lot of people cannot wait 25 years to immigrate. So their life depends on it.
They don't want to wait 25 years, but it's not really up to them. Is it up to them?
If your family is under, they can't. If their family's life is endangered, would you wait?
Oh, but people's lives are in danger around the world, and I feel sorry for them, but why does that mean they have a right to live in my country?
Well, the country was found on immigration, and
no, it wasn't. Actually, I mean,
it
wasn't founded as a haven for the rest of the world. Whatever the poem says, that's not true. So, but I'm just saying, where did they get that right? Why do they have a right to move here if their lives are in danger?
Well, we're the most caring nation in the world, right? We have asylum, and that's one of the ways that I came. And this is not about even deporting these people would hurt our economy significantly. I mean, only deporting the dreamers, we would spend about $60 billion.
That's outside the look. That's a whole nother debate, and I don't know if you're prepared for that. But I mean, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So I've got a really cool demonstration to show you. So the stove that I have here is going to represent your metabolism. It's going to represent how the fire in your body is burning to ultimately burn fat. So this burner is going to represent traditional eating. This burner is going to represent intermittent fasting. Okay, what I have here is a stick of butter. Now this is going to represent about 1/5 of a pound of fat, okay? And I'm going to place a stick of butter for now just in the intermittent fasting pan. You can see the fat is already burning. This represents visceral body fat, the body fat that covers our abdomen, that covers our six-pack so we can't see our abs. It's burning fast, okay? Intermittent fasting is easily accessing this fat burning process. Now, here's what happens when you go through a regular style of eating that isn't intermittent fasting. You wake up in the morning, you have breakfast. Maybe you have some cereal, maybe you have some oatmeal, and maybe you put some bananas on your oatmeal. and it's stopping your metabolism. You see, your metabolism's still burning, but here's the body fat. It's going to take a lot longer for that body fat to burn. You see how over here on the intermittent fasting side, our body's been able to access that.
Coming on, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Victor Davis Hanson is a fellow at the Hoover Institution, a professor emeritus of classics at California State University at Fresno, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Tucker.
So my concern is, how does a country of 320 million people who don't have much in common with each other hang together? And what's the answer to that?
Well, we have to have a common set of values. We have to share in the Constitution, and we're a great experiment. It's never been tried before or after the founding of the United States. We're a multiracial society, but we have one common culture. So our appearance, our superficial appearance, has to be incidental to our character. It's not essential. So if we all start going into tribal cliques, then there is no unification. That's what's happening now. And I felt bad for your guest, but my gosh, it's not just the Trump miracle that's giving empowerment to the working entry-level classes. It's also a radical curtailment in illegal immigration. So for the first time, unemployment may be in peacetime below 4%. And employers have to compete now. They've got to go to the barrio. They've got to go to the inner city. They've got to go to red state poor whites. And they say, you're the only game in town. And they have leverage. And that's why wages are going up after a decade.
Yeah, maybe we'll do something to improve the schools when we have to, when we can't just import a new labor force from abroad and outsource that there. But why would our elites, because what you said is so sensible and obvious, I think, to anyone who thinks about it, if you have a country divided by tribe that's going to be at war with itself, why are our elites encouraging that, which they are?
Well, you had a perfect example in your entry-level remarks, because Ms. Sarsour represents the identity politics left, where she wants a demographic that she, in this Manichaean way, think it's white or non-white. It's almost like we have to have DNA badges. And then she's going to be the collective representative of all the oppressed non-white people for her careerist purposes. And then I admire George W. Bush, but he inadvertently got himself into a situation where he's a spokesman for cheap labor. So he goes overseas and violates Churchill's dictum: you never criticize the incumbent president when you're on foreign soil. And then he says, we need cheap labor. And you think, well, who needs cheap labor? And then he says something that's very tragic. He says, we need people to pick cotton in 105-degree weather. And I'm thinking, cotton picking has been mechanized for 50 years, and mechanization is increasing as illegal immigration decreases. And that was the argument, Tucker, of the 19th century slave owner that said, we need people from Africa to pick cotton in 100-degree weather. It's not a good argument. It's not ethically on the right side of history.
No, our ruling class hasn't updated its perceptions in a few decades. Professor, thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
When life gets busy, choose the immune supplement with more. Airborne, with 2 times more vitamin C than emergency gummies, and specially crafted with vitamins, minerals, and herbs. Airborne, also with probiotics.
We've been telling you for months now about the growing power of the big tech companies, whose brand of surveillance capitalism has come to shape our politics and culture in ways that many people don't perceive. Tonight, we want to give you a very specific example of that. It's both a look into the near future and a terrifying illustration of the control these companies seek over our daily lives. We recently reviewed several patents filed by Google. As we describe them, ask yourself if you're comfortable giving this much power to unelected technocrats you have never met. In the first patent, filed in September of 2016, Google envisions how it could send you personalized advertising based on what a camera observes in your home. In the illustration that Google submitted to the federal government, the patent office, a camera in your bedroom sees a Godfather novel on your nightstand next to your bed and uses that to steer you to watching the movie. If you think that's creepy, prepare yourself, because it gets a lot creepier. In another patent application from September 2016, Google imagines how it could take control of your parenting, your relationship with your children. Google's smart home system could detect children near a liquor cabinet, for example, or in their parents' bedroom, infer that, quote, mischief is occurring and deliver a verbal warning. In another example, Google imagines a hypothetical child called Benjamin. Google's cameras would be watching Benjamin at all times, carefully. They could see if he's playing outside or using electronics. Presumably, they'd also try to use that information to sell him things at some point, because that's the whole point of Google. The same patent also discusses how the smart home could coach families on, quote, areas of improvement. For example, if a family doesn't spend enough time together, eating together, in Google's estimation, Google might scold them and suggest that they set a goal of eating more often together. That is Google's description, not ours, by the way. We contacted Google for comment on this, and the company, and we're assuming it was a person and not a robot, replied this way, quote, we file patent applications on a variety of ideas that our employees come up with. Some of those ideas later mature into real products or services, some don't. In other words, don't worry, we're not spying on you yet. We just have the patent for it. Of course, tech is also dangerous because it is deeply addictive. In fact, more than anything, it's deeply addictive. Now, a group of early Google and Facebook employees are teaming up to check the companies they helped create. Tristan Harris is a former Google employee, heads up this new group, the Center for Humane Technology. Jim Steyer is the founder of Common Sense Media, which advocates for children, and they join us tonight. Thank you both for coming on. So you describe these products as addictive. What do you mean by that?
Well, what most people don't realize, they see addiction and they think it's happening by accident. We're addicted to lots of things. We worried about our kids in the 1970s. They were addicted to gossiping on the telephone. What this misses is that today, behind the other side of the screen when you're using it, there's 100 engineers whose entire job, not because they're evil, but their job is to figure out, how do I keep you coming back to the product? So YouTube wants to autoplay the next video. Snapchat wants to put the number of days in a row in something called a streak next to every single person in your kid's contacts. They say, if you've got 30 friends, they say, here's the number of days in a row you've sent a message to each friend. And it keeps each of them hooked, because the business model, so long as it's advertising, is how do I hold on to your attention? Because the entire stock price is one-to-one linked with how much attention I get. And that's the problem.
So we know, Jim, that screen time has consequences.
Huge consequences.
And it hurts children.
Correct. It can. For sure.
And there are a lot of disturbing metrics about how kids and young adults are doing, and some of them are linked to tech use. Correct. So why has there been no public recognition of this, no widespread?
You know, it's interesting, because I run Common Sense, the biggest kids media group in the country. It's taken time. I think part of it is we got so excited about the incredible technological innovation that Silicon Valley brought us. And they're amazing. We're not anti-tech. Tristan worked at Google. You know, we're not anti-tech at all. Common Sense helps you find the good stuff. But there's clearly been no regulation whatsoever. That's not even at the side level, no real discussion. And I think what's happening, you know, you're a dad just like I am. My kids are starting to go, I'm not sure I really want this in my life all the time. I don't want this constantly pinging me or wanting me to come there. And I think, I mean, Tristan told you what addiction is, but 60% of kids in the United States believe they're addicted to their cell phone. That's a really big deal.
So, but I wonder, do the tech companies know this? So you worked in them.
Yeah.
Are they aware? They must be aware. Yes. You're saying they've designed this to be addictive. Do they have moral qualms about this?
Well, so actually, in 2013, I created a presentation. It was the first Google memo, before a second one got really famous, saying we have a moral responsibility as Google, because no matter what we do, we bump our elbow and 1 billion people's attention goes that way.
Yes.
Or you bump your elbow and 1 billion people's attention goes that way. So how do you ethically steer 2 billion people, actually, their thoughts when they look at a smartphone or a feed? Because from the moment we wake up in the morning to 150 times we check per day, it's like it's never been easier to see as a kid. You see, if you wake up, you check your phone, and you see photo after photo of your friends having fun without you. Is that how we want to ethically care for all these millions and millions of kids' attention?
Do you think, Jim, that there are enough people at these companies who can see clearly enough to pull back from this a little bit?
The key is at the top, because here's the deal. Tristan's a whistleblower. This is the cigarette case all over again.
I agree.
Tristan, we were just with a group of his engineering colleagues who come forward and say, enough is enough. We got to tell you this was unintentional. So the key is the leadership at the top. I actually tell you, this is a major challenge now to the people at the very top of the key tech companies in the United States. What values do you have? Is it just about how much money you can make and how much attention, how much the arms race of attention you can win so you can monetize it by selling ads? sense, or are there other values?
I couldn't.
And by the way, this is not a partisan issue, by the way.
Right, exactly.
Everybody as a parent knows
Everybody feels
this
it.
all across the country.
And it's kind of wrecking the society, and I think we all feel that way.
And then how do you hold them accountable?
I couldn't be rooting for you guys more. Really, Godspeed. I hope you'll come back anytime.
We will.
Please do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Tucker.
Last night, in an exclusive investigation, we showed you 2 patents that Google has filed for. They show the company's willingness to stick a camera in your bedroom and spy on you and your children, and then, of course, use that information to sell you things. That's how surveillance capitalism works. But currently, Google doesn't have a camera in every bedroom or every home. It does have a phone in millions of people's pockets, though. And the question is, how much information is Google getting from those phones? We put a couple of our smartest producers on this, and then we send Fox News headlines anchor Brett Larson out to investigate. Watch.
We know that Google is tracking us. We agree to it when we set up our phones. So we wanted to figure out what exactly Google is learning about us throughout the day. So here's what we're going to do. We have 2 identical phones. The only difference between these 2 phones is this one is in airplane mode. Both of the phones lack a SIM card, and they haven't been set up to access any Wi-Fi networks. So for all intents and purposes, these phones have no connection to a data network. We're going to keep them with us throughout the day. And while I travel around D.C., we're going to figure out just what Google is finding out about me. Our first...
My drive comes from me wanting to reach my potential every day. Maybe it has something to do with my upbringing, maybe it's something internal, but there's always been something inside me that made me want to challenge myself. Coming from an Asian American background, my parents really wanted me to be a doctor. They were really scared for my future. They thought I was going to be unsuccessful, just fail in life. My heart was telling me to stick with what made me happy. And what I knew made me happy was designing and also teaching Pilates. The crazy thing is, when you follow your passion, it leads you to the right place. I'm really proud of...
We're going to figure out just what Google is finding out about me. Our first stop, Sim's convenience store, just outside our Fox bureau, for a quick coffee. From there, we took a walk to the Capitol and took a quick walk around the Senate office buildings, and then decided to hop in a car and head around town.
Hello. We're going to the Children's Hospital, please.
To run our tests, we had to do more than walk the block, so we took a tour around our nation's capital. First, due north to the Children's National Medical Center Hospital, then west to St. Albans School and the National Cathedral. Our tour around town was a 14-mile journey that lasted more than an hour. The entire time, the phones had no access to the internet.
Oh my goodness.
Not a Wi-Fi connection and not any cellular data service. It almost seemed quaint to assume that Google wouldn't even be able to collect data on me.
Let's head back to the bureau, my friend. Oh, that church is beautiful.
Google's business model is simple. Collect data on its users and then use that data to sell targeted ads. It's a business model called surveillance capitalism. But does that critical data collection work even when your phones aren't connected?
So we're back here at our Fox bureau in D.C., and we've got both of our phones exactly how we left with them. The only difference, really, I snapped a couple of bad selfies at the National Cathedral. But otherwise, they have stayed in my pocket for the entire day. So let's find out what they know. This is our man-in-the-middle device. It's basically a Wi-Fi network that these phones are going to connect to once we turn their Wi-Fi on. It's going to pass data through it on the way to Google. But on the way, we're actually going to get a copy of the same data that Google's going to get. We'll be able to decrypt it and then find out where we've been throughout the day.
Within minutes, the numbers rolled in. The phone that wasn't on airplane mode registered more than 100 locations, 130 activities, and even 152 barometric readings. As soon as it hooked up to our Wi-Fi, it transmitted 300 kilobytes of data straight to Google. The phone even logged our exact locations, tracking us all around town, the Capitol, the hospital, the school, and the cathedral.
Now, you may notice what's missing here is the exact route that we took, but it got that data too. It knows when I got out of the car.
The metadata has a time log down to the very second, tracking everything when they think that you're walking, riding, and yes, even getting out of the car.
Okay, so you're thinking, this isn't a big deal. I'll just put my phone in airplane mode. Yeah, we thought of that too. This is the other phone that we had with us that no SIM card also remained in airplane mode the entire time. Let's see what kind of data it captured. The phone with airplane mode activated actually logged more locations and activities than the other phone, and it also transferred hundreds of kilobytes of data to Google as soon as it was activated. The only thing that's missing from this map is our stop at the Children's Hospital, but it still knows we were there. There it is. Exiting vehicle, 100% accuracy. Through complicated user agreements and free software, Google gets users to sign away their privacy for nothing. They're even following you in the places that most people would expect total privacy: government buildings, a children's hospital, a private school, a church. Every move you make, every step you take, Google is watching you. Now, in a statement to Fox News, Google told us that users who want to opt out of tracking should turn off location history. But doing that is harder than you'd think, and most of Google's apps include hidden queries that automatically sign you up for the surveillance. For now, we will continue looking into how Silicon Valley sells your privacy. But until then, just remember, when you're using a free online service, you're probably not the customer, you're actually the product. Tucker?
Shocking. With airplane mode on, they are still following everything you do, and it automatically updates them. Well, I can't wait to find out what they do with all that data. Brett, thank you for that. It was a great report.
Thanks, Tucker.
What's important to you when filing your taxes online?
It's got to be fast.
It's got to be simple. The biggest refund.
With TaxSlayer, you get all that and more.
I'm a tax slayer.
I ran for office because I was very critical of President Obama's trillion-dollar deficits. Now we have Republicans hand in hand with Democrats offering us trillion-dollar deficits. But really, who's to blame? Both parties. We have a 700-page bill that no one has read that was printed at midnight.
And ultimately, it passed. But after Rand Paul led essentially a little filibuster of sorts, he wanted the Senate to go ahead and vote on budget caps. He wanted everybody on the record. Mitch McConnell said, nope, not going to do it. Let's bring in Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of DailyWire.com, syndicated columnist, host of the Ben Shapiro Show. It's a great podcast. Ben, in addition to this thing passing last night, first in the Senate and then in the House in the 5 o'clock hour today, Bette Midler tweeted out after Rand Paul had his little filibuster, said, where's Rand Paul's neighbor when you need him? What do you think of that?
What a class act. I mean, first of all, has Bette Midler been relevant since, like, Beaches in 1988 when I was 4? I'm not sure why she's still around and talking about things and why we care. I guess she was in Hello Dolly or something. But Rand Paul, just on the substance, is exactly correct. I mean, the fact is that Republicans spent years railing against Obama deficits and Democratic deficits, and now they have power again, and they just spent an enormous sum of money. And I understand they wanted to remove sequestration on the military, but they touted that same sequestration as a big win in 2011. I was there. I remember it. So do you. And so the idea that we have to blow out the budget with a Republican majority in both houses just demonstrates once again that in the end, the American people are really inconsistent about spending. On the one hand, they say they want cuts to spending. On the other hand, the minute anyone proposes a specific cut to spending, the American people start to get very upset about it, and both parties tend to buckle to that rather than educating the public.
What are the implications of this deal then, Ben? Because you know, a lot of people did want that military spending that has been hit by sequestration, but when it comes to debt and deficits, what is this going to mean?
I mean, it's just going to mean a continuation of deficits out till the end of time. We're going to be looking at $30 trillion debts in the near future. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that nobody wants to talk about the real drivers of the debt, and that's not military spending at all. The real driver of the debt is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. That represents about 60% of the American federal budget. The American military budget is somewhere between 18 and 20%. So the idea that if we raise the military spending, that this is somehow the great driver of the deficit is not true. I just don't understand why Republicans can't make that case. Let's have our military spending. and let's talk about restructuring some of the real issues in the economy. Social Security's been in the red since 2010. I'm not going to see any of the money I'm putting into Social Security.
And we also want to ask you. We want to ask you about these text messages between those lovers at the FBI. Apparently, they don't like the pro-life march because it ties up traffic and for other reasons. This was some of the text exchange back in January of 2016. Strzok says, blanking marchers, making traffic problems. She writes back, I truly hate these people. No support for the woman who actually has to spend the rest of her life rearing this child. But we care about life. And then she says, a-holes.
Well, I mean, they're a classy couple. I mean, if you couldn't tell from their earlier text messages, they really ought to be on the cover of GQ. Just these are the leading figures in American public life. The only question that really matters in the end for Page and Strzok, the only reason we even care about them, is to what extent their political biases ended up making a difference in terms of their bias in the investigation into Hillary Clinton and the investigation into supposed Trump-Russia collusion, of which there's no evidence to this point. We'll have to see what the rest of the investigation shows. This is why we have a House Intelligence Committee. This is why we have a House Oversight Committee. But it obviously isn't good when you have FBI agents who have this sort of obvious political bias texting with one another about how much they hate particular segments of the American population.
You got to figure, though, Ben, that it's a good thing that this Michael Horowitz, who's the Inspector General over at the Department of Justice, that he's also looking into things because he's the reason they're not on Mueller's team anymore. He's also apparently the reason that Andrew McCabe, who is like the #2 guy at the FBI, he's out because of, sounds like, animus against the president.
I mean, the level of bureaucratic incompetence and corruption, the level of political bias inside of our intelligence agencies, there's a reason that the American people don't trust these agencies, and it's not just because President Trump has been railing against them. It's because these agencies acted in non-trustworthy ways during the last election cycle with regard to Hillary Clinton, and the American people are seeing that with each and every breaking story. So it's a good thing that there are some folks who are attempting to ferret this stuff out, but there is going to have to be a cleansing process that takes place, whether it's by President Trump or whether it's by members of the DOJ and FBI themselves. Something has to be done to restore the trust of the American people here.
Ben, so the budget deal was struck, meant to sort of clear the decks for a deal on the president's wall and border security in exchange potentially for a pathway to citizenship for so-called Dreamers, DACA recipients. Well, a couple of Dreamers have come out publicly and said that if they're not allowed to stay legally after the March 5th deadline, they're going to basically self-deport and leave the U.S. if a deal isn't reached. What do you make of that?
So do they want to stay or go?
Well, I mean, I'm sort of confused by the strategy here. I guess the idea is that if so I guess that they're trying to blackmail people who want to deport them with the threat that they will self-deport, which doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. But I guess the real answer is they're trying to blackmail Democrats. They're trying to suggest to Democrats that Democrats don't care enough about DACA recipients. So watching the internecine warfare between potential DACA recipients and Dreamers and the Democratic Party that claims to speak for them is sort of amusing.
All right. It's always a pleasure. Ben Shapiro joining us live today. Check out his podcast by the same name. Sir, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks so much. Late in the evening, right, in the early wee morning hours on the East Coast, the Republican Congress, along with a bunch of Democrats, voted in favor of a 2-year funding bill. This is not a budget, okay? It's not technically a budget. The reason that makes a difference is if you don't pass a budget, you can't use reconciliation processes to pass new bills. I discussed this a little bit yesterday, but in order for you to pass a bill under reconciliation, meaning with 51 votes in the Senate, in order for the filibuster not to apply, you have to pass a bill that is budget neutral. Well, that doesn't apply if there is no budget. You cannot have a budget neutral bill if there is no budget. So they essentially passed a funding bill but no budget. So that prevents them from passing any new legislation that really affects spending. So they can pass something on DACA maybe, but that's about it, right? There will be no further movement on Obamacare. There'll be no further movement on taxes. There'll be no further movement, significant movement on regulation in all likelihood. That's a serious problem. The bigger problem, however, is they just blew out the budget. I mean, blew it out. They're spending more money now than Barack Obama was spending. They're spending about the same amount of money, actually, as Obama was spending. They blew out $1 trillion debt yesterday, $1 trillion deficit in the budget. They blew a hole in it. Rand Paul wanted to stand up and say something about it. Rand has a knack for standing and talking at these times, and that's something you got to appreciate about the senator from Kentucky. Here is Rand Paul saying, listen, we campaign on fiscal responsibility and then we lie about it.